What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to another episode in Software Engineering and Salesforce. My name is Brooks Johnson, and this week we are going to talk about the unit of work pattern. I've had a lot of requests for this one for at least a year, probably since I started making these, and I've ducked down because frankly, it's a lot of work. So I think this is going to be a really good one. We're going to take Martin Fowler's from his book, Patterns of Enterprise Application Architecture. We are going to apply it to Salesforce. I've created a new repo, right, that you can take a look at, commented the heck out of this very simple example of a unit of work. And this is what we are going to hop in and build today. So take a second, hit like and subscribe, and we'll get into the code. So let's take a second here and look at what exactly is the unit of work. And before we get into that, I want to say for those of you who are not familiar, right, this is from a book called Patterns of Enterprise Application Architecture that was written by Martin Fowler, right, one of the great thought leaders in software design. So it's this book right here. Highly recommend you, if you don't have a copy, that you get one, put it on your shelf. Lots of stuff to learn from it. Often confused, though, with this book, Design Patterns. So these are different things, right? And a lot of the enterprise architecture patterns make use of what you'll find in design patterns. The query object, uses the interpreter pattern, things like that. And I'm going to say, I keep pulling books off my shelf here because I want to kind of walk through the evolution of this. The unit of work was probably made most famous by Andy Fawcett and his FFlib Apex Commons library, and his book where he takes a lot of Martin Fowler's ideas and applies them to the Salesforce platform. So what I wanted to do today with the unit of work is, because I get a lot of requests or questions about Apex Commons and FFlib. And first, I'm going to put a link in the description. Matt Gary over at Coding with the Force on his YouTube channel has a fantastic tutorial series on Apex Commons. I wanted to just take the unit of work pattern and actually just kind of rip it out of FFlib, out of the Apex Commons library, and just show at its simplest level what this does without all the complexity, all the mocking, all the interfaces, all the abstraction that is going on that can make it hard to understand if you are approaching it for the first time. So we're going to just look at a really, really simple implementation of a unit of work in Apex. But so if we want to what is the unit of work, right? So if we go here to our martinfowler.com, right? And this is, right, patterns of enterprise application architecture. We're going to talk about it is, so we can change the database. The unit of work, what it's designed to do is keep track of everything that we do during a business transaction that can affect the database. When you're done, it figures out everything that needs to be done to alter the database as the result of your work. So in Apex, this lets us centralize all our DML into one place, right? We are just going to call kind of this, commit work method. And it's going to handle our inserts, our updates, our deletes, and so on and so forth. It can handle the relationships. And what that does, so it gives us our DML centralized into one point, one kind of central point of failure also. So our error handling is always consistent, always the same. And I'm going to say it's up to you. Take this video today and decide, for you, do you want to implement this? Does it work for your org? Is it necessary? If it's a small org without a lot of Apex going on, it's probably not. If you have a giant org, right, with hundreds of classes, DML happening all over the place, I highly recommend you start to look at, the separation of concerns and how maybe some sort of a unit of work pattern might some sort of a unit of work pattern, might be useful for you and your code base. So that's it. Let's hop over and open up IntelliJ and Illuminated Cloud, which is what I use. And let's start coding up a unit of work. All right. So just to set the stage, if you're coding along with me, right, we have a couple things that are stubbed out before we get started today. I have this class, our basic, I've called it basic UOW, basic unit of work. And it has two inner classes, relationships and relationship. And we'll get to those later. And as we work through this, right, I have got a bunch of unit test methods that are already stubbed out, right? So we're going to rebuild this. We're going to run the tests. And we are going to kind of go through the simplest to the more. So we're just going to build this, and we're going to build something that can insert and update our data. And then we are going to implement the logic for how do we do our relationship. Okay, so to get started with our unit of work class, which we've got the stub here, right? Public with sharing basic UOW. We are going to give it a few properties, few member variables. So the first one we're going to give, super important here, is a list of S-object type. And I'm just going to call that, well, my keyboard's being funny, types. Then we are going to give it a few maps. There's going to be a bunch of maps in here. So we're going to say map string list S-object. No, right? Map string S-object. And this is going to be our new list by type. And that's just a naming convention I like to use when I create maps, is something by type, right? You know, accounts by IDs, things like that. And then we want a map of, once again, string list S-object. And this is going to be our changed list by type. All right, so as I said, today for our unit of work, all we're going to do is implement a unit of work that handles inserts and updates and relationships. So this is going to be, right, these are going to be the member variables that handle our inserts and our updates. And now we're going to make one more map, and this is going to be a string, and it's going to be a map, and then relationships. And this is maybe where some of the more confusing stuff happens, and we'll get into it. I'm just going to call it relationships. And that should be a lowercase r, though, huh? All right, so relationships. We'll call relationships by type to be consistent, all right? Okay, and so if you are not familiar, this is something we have a map, and relationships, remember, is our it's our inner class here, relationships. So that'll come into play later. But now what we need to do is we're going to give our unit of work a constructor. Public basic unit of work. Okay. And our constructor is going to take a list of S-object types. And we are going to call that types. And then we are going to say this dot types equals types. All right, so we are going to populate that from what gets passed in our constructor. And then we are just going to, for the rest of them, we're just going to make new instances of these maps. So I'm going to say this dot new list by type. All right. There's going to be an equal to new map. Say this dot change list by type. And this dot relationships by type. Whoop, not new hash map. We're not working with Java here. New map. Tab 9, you let me down. String. Relationships. There we go. Okay. So I want to call this, and we're going to show this in our first test, but so types here is super important, right? And the order that we pass in this list of S-object types is really important to our unit of work. And so we're going to see that. So we are going to First of all, we're going to create down here. We're going to come back up, and we're going to work on this in our constructor. A method called handle register type. Move over here so I can see my notes. And we are going to make this is going to be a private. And be void because it doesn't return anything. And we're going to call it handle. What is... I don't know. Something happens with my keyboard and Camtasia. Handle register type. It's going to take an S-object type. And now what we're going to do is in our new list by type, right, that which, if you remember, was a map of string to S-object type, we are going to put. And our key is going to be our type dot. What's going on? Type.get describe.get name. My code completion isn't coming on, and it's causing me problems. And then a new list of S objects. Pause for a second there while I edited that. Didn't catch that I did not put my parentheses at the end of get describe. All right. So there we go. We are, for each one of the types that our unit of work is going to handle, we are going to put that type into our new list by type map and an empty list of S objects. And for change list by type, that is going to be the exact same thing. Change list by type. Put type.getDescribe.get name. So that's all we have to. So we're going to exact same pattern, right, for our change list by type. And for our relationship map, we are going to do let's see, relationships by type. Dot put, and then our key is once again going to be our type.getDescribe. Get name. And then it is a new instance of the relationships class. So that is our handle register method. And so now that we have that built, we are going to come back on up to our constructor. Right? And so in our constructor, we're going to call this. And we are going to say for SObject type in our types list. All right? Handle register type. And we are going to provide it the current type. So let's just take a second and look at what we just did, because this is how we are going to set up our unit of work to actually, it's how we configure it, right? So we're going to pass in a list of SObject types, and that's going to, for like our example today, it's going to be like accounts, contacts, tasks, something like that. All right, so we're going to pass that in. Then for each of those types up here, we are going to call handle register. And handle register is just going to get the name of that SObject type. And in the new list, the change list, and the relationships, our member properties, right, it is just going to go in and it's going to say, hey, it's going to add in a string, right? Accounts and a empty list of SObjects, contacts, empty list of SObjects. Same thing, you know, accounts, contacts, and instances of the relationships class. So that's what that's what we do when we're going to just set this up for our basic configuration to get started with. So I'm going to uncomment our first test here, and we're not going to run it because it is definitely going to fail. That should, I'm not sure my hotkeys aren't working. There we go. Okay. Because we don't have, you know, our register new methods or anything built yet. But what I wanted to show you, right, so if we are going to, you know, so up here, right, I have this list of S-object types, right, and it just has the account S-object type and the contact S-object type. An instance of our basic unit of work, and we are going to pass in that types, and so the handle register method that we just built, that is going to get called directly from the constructor. Now, if we want to register some new things, we are going to build our register new method and our commit work method. Okay. So I'm going to go down. Same thing. We are still just working with our basic unit of work class. We're not touching anything with relationships. And we're going to create a new method. And it is going to be called register new. So public and void, because it doesn't return anything. Register new. And it is going to take an S object. And we are going to call it S-obj. Maybe not the best variable name in the world, but S-object is already, right? That's a reserved word, so we can't use that. So I'm going to say just conventionally, I think that one works. And we are going to, once again, we're going to get the name of our S-object type. So I'm just going to say string S-object type, and that is going to equal S-obj dot get S-object type get describe dot get name. So we're going to get the name, and then we are going to go to our new list by type. And what we are going to do is we're going to go and we are going to get we're going to get the appropriate S-object type. And then we are going, because remember, so we called get on our map. We passed in there the key. And I'm going to have to change that name because I don't think S-object type is actually going to compile if I try to use that as a variable name. And then we're going to call the add method because, right, that's the value in our map is a list. We're going to call add, and we are going to pass into add the S-object. And let me fix that one because I am almost certain that that is not going to compile. String. And what do we want to, and that was dumb. Let's, instead of making it harder on myself, we'll just use IntelliJ. And I'm going to change that to S-obj type. And I think that will work for today. Okay, so once again, we got the name of our S-object type. We went to our map and we said, hey, here's the key, right? Here's the key. It's account, it's contact, it's lead, it's custom object, whatever. And the value with that key is a list of S-objects. I'm going to call the add method on the list and pass in that S-object. And so that is our register new method. Our register change is going to work really very much the same way. So, in fact, I'm going to say right now we are just going to build register change, even though we're not ready to test it yet. I'm going to say public void register change. And same thing, S-object, S-obj. And we're going to do string S-obj type And that is going to equal sobj dot get sobject type dot get describe dot get name. And just like we did with our register new, now we are going to, for our map of sobject types to changed, right? We are going to do change list by type. All right, I'm going to say dot get sobject type says same thing. Hey, go get the value associated with this particular key, which is going to be a list, and pass in that sobject. All right, so that's our basic register new and our register change. So that is, eventually, this is what we're going to be using for the DML to do an update or an insert. So now to test that out, right? So let's start getting some actual DML in here, and we are going to do a method, and this is going to do our actual DML. We're going to say public void commit work. Doesn't take any arguments. And what we're going to do, we're going to say save point. So this is one of the, what we're going to see here, like this is one of the values of centralizing our DML in one place, is it lets us make sure we can keep our database consistent. Because let's say if we had a bunch of accounts that we're going to insert, and then a bunch of contacts that were supposed to be associated with those, and something went wrong with our contacts. So now we have those accounts in the database, but we don't have, the contacts or anything like that. So now your data is now inconsistent. It's out of sync. So this can let us roll everything back if anything fails on the transaction. So we'll say database, and we're going to say SP, and now we're going to just give that the value of database dot set save point. And then I'm going to do a try catch. And just to put something in that catch block. So again, I've put the only thing, just throwing a debug statement in your catch block is a terrible, terrible practice. But for YouTube for today, right, we're not going to implement all kinds of error handling, right? We're just going to say system.debug e. And you know what? We'll do a database rollback. So rollback, and we'll pass it in our save point. All right. Wait, what's going on? Okay. And sometimes IntelliJ gets a little funky on me like this, so I'm going to exit out and then open my class back up. Back to our basic unit of work. All right. And we even zoom in and give it a little bit. So we are in our commit work. So now let's just do, we're going to do insert. And of course, right, once again, we don't have a method to do this. So I'm going to go down here, and we're going to do another private method, private void do insert. Not do inert. Do insert. Typing is hard. Okay, so in our do insert, we are going to iterate over the types in our type mask. So what we're going to say is we're going to do for sobject type in types, right? So we are going to iterate over. So when we configured this, right, and we looked at that test and we gave it accounts, contacts, and tasks or whatever, it's going to iterate over each one of those type values in that type list. And then because it's in our insert, it's going to go get the values in that new list by type map. So we're just going to say insert new list by type dot get. I'm just going to say string value of I don't even know if I really need to do the string.value of, but I did that earlier and it worked. So we're just going to roll with it for now. All right. I think we've written a lot of code here so far. So let's take a break and just see if this sucker even compiles at this point. So I'm going to drop down to my terminal and we're just going to push that. All right, check that out. It compiled. And if you were watching earlier and you called it out there, well, I did actually miss a parenthesis up here on like line 25, 26. So it did fail the first time when I paused the video for a second to fix that up because nobody wants to watch me do that junk. And let's close out our terminal. And we are going to go back through. So we have handled our insert code. Let's take a second, right? And let's just walk through how we're going to test this. And I think the tests are always sometimes the best documentation of how this is going to work. So I would go back and we're just going to create that list of S-object types. In this case, we're just doing accounts and contacts. We are going to get an instance of our basic unit of work class. And we're going to pass in that list of types. And then we're going to call unit of work.registerNew. Going to give it a new account. And we're going to call unit of work.registerNew, and we're going to give it a new contact. And then we're going to call commit work. And for this one, all I'm going to really test is to, hey, was this contact actually inserted into the database, right? There is no, we're not doing any relationships, anything like that, anything crazy here. So let's just run that test. Boom, and it worked. Awesome. All right, so now let's hop down. Let's uncomment this. Now we're going to start getting crazy because we are cooking with gas. All right. Uncomment that one. And let's scroll back up. And we are going to do our update. All right, so same thing. We're just going to insert an account. We are going to, so we've already inserted it to the database. And, right, we are same thing just like before, right? We are going to give our list. All right, so just like before, right? And we're going to give it that list of S-object types. And we are going to, then we're just going to go, we're going to change the name. And we're going to call the register change method, pass in that changed account. And if you've seen it, I just want to, so if you are using, the Apex Commons unit of work, this method is register dirty. Sometimes it throws people off or whatever. So for this one, we're just going to call it register change. But dirty data, right, is same thing. It's data, anything that you have changed that has not yet been saved to the database. So same thing, unit of work, register change, right? And then we're going to call commit work. And what we expect is that change happens. So let's just go back in because we actually haven't done our register change code yet, right? We've done our, let me close our terminal out too. Don't need that. So we've got our do insert. We've got our register change. So now, next thing we need to do after we've done our insert is we need to call in our commit work method. We're going to make another method. We're going to call this one do update. Okay. And once again, we don't have that method yet. So let's go down here. And this is going to be a private method. Void because it's not going to return anything. Do update. And it is really going to work exactly like we just saw for our do insert. Once again, we're going to iterate over our types for S-object type and types. And then we're going to say update, change list by type, get string dot value of type. And I already know somebody's watching this and I'm waiting for it in the comments. Yes, there is DML happening inside a for loop here. In this context, I'm going to say I feel like it's okay. You got, 150 DML statements you can do. If you've configured this, and, we could even add in some null track, like if the list is empty, don't do it. So if this one, right, we're just passing in, like we've configured our unit of work to only say, accounts, contacts, tasks, whatever's happening in the context of this particular application that we're building, right? And we're just doing, a couple lists for update, a list for change. If we check for our null, you can see, we're controlling it pretty well. So again, take or leave it. Don't you? Maybe if you have a better way in the but yes, there is DML inside a unit of work. There is DML being called from inside a for loop. But if you are using a unit of work consistently throughout your org, I feel pretty confident that you could keep under the 150 statement limit. I hope it's 150. I checked that before this video, but if I got it wrong, let me know in the comments. Or who knows, maybe Salesforce will give us, maybe they'll increase it in a couple weeks. Never know, summer 22. All right, so we've got our do update, and I think that is all we need to do to add to for our next test to pass. It does update. So once again, let's try and compile this. All right, that compiled. Let's head back up here to it does update. Let's run that test. Boom, there it goes, it passed. Now we are going to do the register relationships. And this is probably the trickiest part of how the unit of work is implemented and how this handles, setting that relationship between your accounts, your contacts, your tasks, whatever. And it's also why this order is so important, right? When you configure your unit of work, right, and you pass in this list of S-object types, right? So if we want to establish a relationship between contact and account, our accounts have to be in the database first before we do that. So it's really important that the order that we set this list up in really matters when we configure our unit of work. So I'm going to go and I'm going to uncomment this test. And we should have all kinds of red squigglies, right? Because we don't have a register relationship method yet. We're going to go back to our basic unit of work. And first thing we're going to do is we are going to build that register relationship method. All right. So we've got our register new, our register change. We'll go right here, and I'm going to say public void, and we're going to say register relationship. And this is going to take a few parameters. I'm going to give it an S-object, and this is going to be the first one, right? This is going to be the child object. I'm going to call this one record. So if we're establishing a relationship between accounts and contacts, this would be our contact. And then we need to tell it the field that is the relationship field. Schema dot this object field relationship field. And the last one is the parent object. So we're going to say S object. I feel like I've got I think we're okay there. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get the object type, right? So of our child record. So we're going to say string S object type. And when that is going to equal record dot get s object type get describe dot get name. Once again, we're using that a lot in our unit of work. Now that we've got that, we are going to go to our relationships map, and we are going to get the appropriate relationships class for our S-object type. And I'm going to have to change that name again, right? I'm just going to do that right now. Because I'm going to say S-object type. Get the value associated with that key in our map, which is going to be an instance of our relationships class. And we are going to call the add method, which we actually have not built yet. So we're going to pause here and we're going to do that. But we're just going to say record relationship field related to, because those are the properties that it's going to take. All right, so let's stop right here. And we're going to go down to our relationships class, which up to now has been stubbed out, right? We don't have anything in here. So relationships is going to take, it's going to have a member property of list of this child class of relationship, right? So relationships is exactly what it is. It has a member variable that is a list of the relationship class. Right? And we're going to call that the relationship. I'm going to call it the relationship list. Okay. And then in our, I'm going to give it a constructor, public relationships. And I'm going to say this dot relationship list is going to equal a new list of relationship. Remember, this other class. And now we have our add method. And what we're going to do is, once again, public void add. And that's going to take as a property, an S object, so just like before. I'm going to say record, an S object field, call that the related field. And the object that it's related to, which is going to be another S object. Okay. And now this is where this is where a lot of the indirection starts to happen in this. We're going to say relationship equals new. So now we are going to create an instance of this relationship class. New relationship field, and also related to. And then we're going to say, what we're going to do is we're going to do our relationship list dot add relationship. All right, so we have to finish building out our relationship class first, because, right, so add gives us a new instance of our relationship object, and we are going to add that to our list up here of our relationship list. So our relationship object really just a kind of a wrapper class, right? Well, I guess they both are, but we're going to say we're going to give it a couple properties. We'll just say public this object record, all right? Public S object field, related field, and public S object related to. Okay, so we're going to go with it. And now we're going to give it a constructor. Public relationship. Check out, it looks like tab 9 wants to help me out here, so we're going to go with that. Related field. And also, we need to give it our related to. And then we're going to do this. Record equals record. This dot related field equals related field. And this dot related to equals related to. All right. So we've got our constructor handle. And real quickly, we are going to build a resolve method in here. And you're going to see how this, and so I find like this is one of the challenges of reading about the unit of work and any of the books I showed is there's a lot of indirection and different, and there's not, sometimes I think even when I'm trying to teach this, there's not necessarily, I still can't figure like the best order to show how do we build these things. So trying to not hop all over the place as much as I can, but I feel like sometimes it's a little unavoidable. So we're going to give this a resolve method. I'm going to say public void resolve. And I'm going to say this dot record dot put, which is a value from a part of the Apex. It's a method that we can call on the S object type. I'm going to say this dot related field. I'm going to set it equal to this dot related to ID. All right. We're going to see how all this works shortly. All right, so there's our resolve method. Okay, so now that we've got that taken care of, let's go back up to our relationship. So we've completed our relationship class. And we need to finish our relationships class. So we've got our constructor. We've got this add method built that, if you remember, we called when we registered a relationship. And now we're going to do one more method. It's also going to have a resolve method. Public void resolve. And what it's going to, we're going to say for relationship in the relationship list. Relationship. This is where the magic happens, folks. Relationship.resolve. All right, so now let's go back up and show how we're going to make it's all going to come together now. I hope it makes sense. I really hope this makes sense. Hopefully it's not a long video and you guys are all like, Brooks, this is crap. I don't understand anything you're talking about. You did a terrible job explaining. Because this is, I don't know, it's a tough one. It took me a while to understand the unit of work. So let's go back up to our register relationship. All right, so relationships by type, right? So we've got that all set up now. So we're going to go to our map, right? Which in our map contains this instance of the relationships class. The relationships class has an add method, right? And we are going to call add, and we are going to pass in these values, the record, the related field, and what it's related to. Now, if we go down to our commit work, so we're going to go to we call our do insert. Now, what we want to do, and this is so before we insert, we are going to do this. We're going to say, because remember, we're iterating over the types in our list, our accounts, our contacts, our leads, our tasks, our opportunities, whatever we have. And I'm going to say this dot relationships by type dot get. I'm going to do, once again, I'm just going to do that string dot value of type, and then we're going to call the resolve method. So let's take a second and talk about what's happened. So let's just say we've already inserted our accounts. All right. Now we're going to come to, in this list, our contacts. And we're going to go to our map. And we're going to say, hey, go get me the appropriate list. Go get me the instance of the relationships class for contacts. And then call resolve on it. And let's go down. We're going to look at resolve. All right. And because resolve, right, it has this member property. It's a list of relationships. And it's going to iterate through those. And each of the relationship objects has its own resolve method, right? And it already has, right, the child record, the parent record, and the field. And it is just going to go in and it's going to grab that and it's going to update that field value. And then we actually do the insert. So if we go back to our test, register relationships, same thing. We're going to do a contact, add an account. We're going to create our basic unit of work. We're going to give it the S object types in the correct order. We are going to register new, and then we're going to register this relationship, that contact is related to that particular account, right? And that account, and then we are going to call the commit work method. And when this is done, right, we expect to see that, hey, we're going to query the database. We're going to get this contact, and we're going to see if the updated contact's account is equal to the account ID. So let's take a second. We need to compile this before we run any tests. All right, compiled. Let's drop out of the terminal and let's run this test. Fingers crossed. And yes, indeed, it did work. We got everything. So we have done, let's run all our tests, make sure that we didn't break anything, that the entire unit of work is passing. Awesome. So that is a unit of work. And again, this was a really basic unit of work. There is no mocking, right? There's nothing really all that sophisticated about it. But my goal here was to kind of take this out of the context of Apex Commons FFlib and just demonstrate how this unit of work pattern works and how we can apply that to Salesforce. There's a lot going on here, so I want to take a second and also just call out, right, I'm going to drag this over, right? I also created a new repo where I'm going to try to do some of these videos for enterprise patterns. And I really try to comment the heck out of this, right? So if you want to go, please go take a look at the GitHub. Feel free to submit PRs if you want. This is a community project. It's not just my project. But I tried to just comment the heck out of it, right? So hopefully there's a lot of kind of my own notes in there that'll help make this a little more understandable for you. So again, if this is helpful, please take a second, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see everybody in the next video.